There was a time when cars were packed with features so bizarre that they made sense only in their own weird little era. Some looked high-tech, others, pure marketing madness. But all of them shared one thing: they didn't age well. Buckle up as we take a ride through 20 useless old car features that faded into history, and for good reason. Voice alert systems. Ah yes, the golden age of talking cars, because nothing says luxury quite like being scolded by your own dashboard. In the 1980s, automakers decided that what drivers truly needed wasn't smoother handling or better mileage, but a robotic backseat driver embedded in the dash. Enter the voice alert system, an early attempt at in-car AI that sounded less like HAL 9000 and more like a speak and spell having a bad day. One of the earliest culprits was the Chrysler LeBaron, which greeted drivers with monotone announcements like,
"Your engine oil pressure is low,"
or the legendary "a door is ajar," a phrase that haunted road trips and confused children everywhere. The goal was noble: keep drivers informed without them having to glance away. But what started as a futuristic innovation quickly became a source of irritation, especially when the alerts repeated endlessly like a nagging co-pilot who couldn't be muted. As technology improved, these mechanical voices were phased out in favor of digital dashboards and intuitive icons. Still, they left behind a quirky legacy, proof that even well-intentioned tech can miss the mark. Today's sleek voice assistants owe a nod to these awkward pioneers that once tried, and mostly failed, to give cars a personality. Swivel bucket seats. Ever wish your car seat could spin around like a game show contestant's chair? Well, once upon a groovy time, it actually could. In the late 1950s, automakers, clearly chasing comfort and a flair for the dramatic, introduced swivel seats, giving drivers the ability to pirouette into their ride with the grace of a Broadway dancer. General Motors leaned into this novelty through the 60s and 70s, particularly in models like the Chevy Monte Carlo and Oldsmobile Cutlass. The idea? Make entering and exiting your car feel less like a yoga pose and more like sliding into a booth at a diner. And for a brief, glorious moment, it worked. The seats rotated smoothly, added a dash of style, and made valet parking feel like theater. But like most clever gimmicks, this one spun out of favor. The swivel mechanism was mechanically fussy, often broke, and gobbled up interior space. Passengers complained of feeling unstable, like riding in an office chair on wheels during a sharp turn. By the late 70s, practicality pulled rank, and the spinning seat took its final bow. Chrysler gave it a short-lived encore in the 2000s with the Swivel and Go, but once again, utility won out. Turns out, comfort alone doesn't keep you on the road. Vibrasonic sound system. Some car features were born from brilliance. Others, pure boredom in the design lab. Take General Motors' short-lived obsession with turning your Buick into a bargain bin concert hall, the Vibrasonic sound system. Rolled out in the late 1950s, it promised to wrap your music in lush, echoing reverb, the kind you'd expect in a cathedral, or maybe a tiled bathroom. The idea was to elevate in-car audio beyond the flat crackle of AM radio, so GM fitted cars with amps and carefully placed reflectors to bounce sound around like a garage band with a god complex. At first, it felt fancy. Every song sounded like it was echoing through eternity. But then came the practical problems. Conversations became a mess, radio voices got distorted, and the reverb quickly turned from rich to ridiculous. As if that weren't enough, the system was a nightmare to install. Panels shook, sound quality dipped, and drivers started to miss plain old silence. Interestingly, GM wasn't the only one chasing this illusion. Decades later, Toyota briefly added reverb switches to some 80s models, proving bad ideas have a long shelf life. By 1965, Vibrasonic quietly vanished, leaving behind a legacy that proves not every innovation needs an echo. Pop-up headlights. Looking cool used to come with moving parts and just enough mechanical risk to keep things interesting. Hideaway headlights, also called pop-up headlights, were the automotive equivalent of a tuxedo with a secret lever. Sleek, dramatic, and undeniably cinematic, these retractable lights gave muscle cars and sports coupes an almost human swagger, like they were raising an eyebrow before burning rubber. While most people link them to the golden era of American muscle, the concept dates back to the 1936 Cord 810, which stunned crowds with its disappearing headlights at the New York Auto Show. Alfa Romeo followed the trend that same year, but it wasn't until 1962 that things really got flashy, thanks to the Lotus Elan and its electrically powered James Bond-style headlamp lifts. Of course, style came with strings attached. The motors were notoriously fussy. The lights sometimes refused to rise, or worse, got stuck mid-pop like a car caught mid-thought. Repairs were expensive, parts hard to source, and eventually regulations and cost concerns dimmed their appeal. By 2004, the last holdouts faded into the rearview mirror. LEDs and projector beams took the spotlight, leaving pop-up headlights as relics of a bolder, more theatrical era, when even your headlights knew how to make an entrance. Automatic seatbelts. What could possibly go wrong with a seatbelt that strangles you the moment you shut the door? In the late 1970s, car makers thought they had cracked the code to saving lives by removing human decision-making entirely. Thus came the automatic seatbelt, part safety device, part haunted marionette. These motorized belts slid along rails, sweeping dramatically across your chest like a slow-motion karate chop. The goal: increase seatbelt usage without depending on forgetful drivers. It sort of worked, until it didn't. Many people still ignored the separate lap belt, defeating the whole purpose. One version even attached to the door itself, forcing passengers to awkwardly dodge the belt just to sit down. Safety, it turns out, shouldn't require acrobatics. This strange chapter in automotive design gained steam after the Carter administration pushed for passive restraints or airbags in all cars. Fun fact, by 1983, fewer than 15% of Americans regularly wore seatbelts, so automatic systems felt like a necessary shortcut. But the magic wore off quickly. The belts were finicky, inconvenient, and prone to jamming. By the mid-90s, airbags took center stage, offering better protection with far less drama. And just like that, the auto-strangling seatbelt slinked into history, unclipped and unloved. Which one of these features made you laugh, or made you go, "Wait, that was real?" Tell us which one surprised you the most in the comments. Cassette players. Cassette players didn't just play music, they rewound our frustrations one tangled ribbon at a time. In the golden age of mixtapes and mullets, these clunky yet beloved devices reigned supreme on dashboards across America. Starting in the early 1970s, they gave drivers something no radio station ever could: total control over the vibe. Suddenly, your car could be a rolling concert hall, or more often, a scratchy echo chamber of a bootleg Bon Jovi tape. As automakers leaned into the trend, brands like Blaupunkt and Pioneer made cassette decks a luxury item. By the 1980s, they were everywhere, enhanced by features like auto reverse, Dolby noise reduction, and fast-forward buttons that seemed to never stop exactly where you wanted. Still, they were adored. People curated road trip playlists with near-religious devotion, creating emotional time capsules wrapped in plastic and magnetic tape. And here's a fun twist. One of the best-selling car audio accessories of the 90s wasn't even a cassette. It was the cassette adapter, which let you connect a CD player or iPod through your tape deck. Ironic, right? Eventually, CDs and digital audio elbowed the cassette into retirement, but for a generation, Nothing said freedom quite like a dashboard full of tapes and the eternal quest for the perfect side A. Opera windows. What happens when car designers run out of ideas but still want to charge extra? You get the opera window, a design flourish that tried its best to whisper luxury, but mostly screamed, "Why?" From the early 1970s to the mid-1980s, these petite, oval or round rear-side windows became a status symbol on American land yachts. You'd find them tucked into the vinyl roofs of Lincoln Continentals, Cadillac Seville's, and Chrysler New Yorkers, sitting there like little monocles, offering a view of absolutely nothing. They weren't for visibility, ventilation, or safety. They were just there. Decorative fluff dressed up as prestige. Manufacturers pitched them as reminiscent of box seats at the opera, hence the name, but in reality, they were more costume than function. Over time, their presence became less of a style statement and more of a design cliché, often undermined by poor ceiling and frame rattles that added background noise to your symphony of V8 rumble. As automotive design moved toward cleaner, more aerodynamic lines in the late 80s, opera windows were quietly phased out. And just like that, one of the most unnecessary yet oddly memorable car features took its final bow, leaving behind only trim outlines and some rain-stained regrets. Ashtrays and cigarette lighters. Lighting up in a car was once as routine as adjusting the rearview mirror. For decades, ashtrays and cigarette lighters weren't just standard. They were expected, like seatbelts you didn't bother using. By the 1950s, cars came with ashtrays in every door and lighters so reliable they could ignite a lucky strike during a snowstorm. These weren't afterthoughts. They were proudly engineered features. Some luxury models even had illuminated ashtrays and lighters that popped out like mini toasters, ready to serve your nicotine needs at a moment's notice. Cigarette culture wasn't just accepted. It was built into the dashboard. But as public health campaigns gained ground and smoking began its slow exit from the mainstream, these once iconic fixtures started to vanish. In 1994, Chrysler was the first to pull the plug, quietly removing ashtrays as a standard feature. Other automakers followed suit, trading the puff for practicality. Ironically, the humble cigarette lighter socket found new life as the 12-volt power outlet, a relic repurposed for phone chargers, GPS units, and eventually portable espresso machines. The ashtrays, though? They faded into dusty obsolescence, remembered mostly by mechanics and old-school smokers. Proof that not every classic car feature ages as well as a fine cigar. Curb feelers. Curb feelers were the automotive equivalent of whiskers, twitchy little antennas that helped your car sense danger before it kissed the concrete. Back in the 50s and 60s, when chrome was king and white walls were sacred, these humble metal wires jutted out just above the wheels like tiny parking guardians, ready to scream, via high-pitched scraping, the moment you drifted too close to a curb. At the time, they made perfect sense. Drivers wanted to protect their prized hubcaps from scuffs, and parallel parking wasn't exactly an Olympic event most folks trained for. Curb feelers offered a primitive form of proximity alert, low-tech, but oddly effective. But the charm wore thin. The wires bent easily, rusted faster than a junkyard dog's collar, and eventually became more of an eyesore than a solution. While cars like the Cadillac DeVille wore them like functional jewelry, the reality was less glamorous. They helped, until they didn't. As auto tech marched forward, bringing parking sensors, backup cameras, and self-parking systems, the humble curb feeler clanked its way into obsolescence. Still, they remain a fascinating footnote in car history, a relic of a time when drivers relied on sound and instinct, not screens and sonar, to park with pride. Bench seats, front. Who needs personal space when you can cram 3 people across one continuous cushion? That was the everyday reality of the front bench seat, an unbroken stretch of padding that turned the front row into a shared experience, whether you liked it or not. Back in the mid-20th century, bench seats were everywhere. They offered simplicity, practicality, and enough room for mom, dad, and an unlucky sibling in the middle. For young couples, they doubled as date night real estate, with no console getting in the way of a flirtatious slide across the vinyl. But style and safety don't sit still. As European sports cars with bucket seats gained traction after World War II, American taste began to shift. Buckets felt sleeker, more personal, and worked better with center consoles, automatic transmissions, and emerging seatbelt regulations. By 2013, the Chevy Impala quietly retired the last front bench in an American sedan. Trucks held on longer, but even those are leaning bucket these days. Interestingly, in the earliest Chevrolets, you didn't choose between bench and bucket. The bench was your only option. It's a detail that speaks volumes about the era. 1 seat, 1 family, 1 wide ride. A design born of togetherness, now replaced by cup holders and armrests of solitude. If this video brought back some memories, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to support our channel. Push-button transmissions. In the age of tail fins and space races, even shifting gears had to feel futuristic. So Chrysler, never shy about mixing flair with function, rolled out its push-button automatic transmission in 1956, a bold attempt to trade levers for logic. Instead of the standard column or floor shifter, drivers were greeted with a row of buttons mounted on the dashboard, inviting them to drive at the tap of a finger. The early PowerFlight 2-speed system later gave way to the more capable 3-speed TorqueFlite, but the visual gimmick stayed the same. Chrysler proudly marketed it as sleek, modern, and especially appealing to women, because apparently pressing buttons was less intimidating than moving a stick. At first, the idea turned heads. For some, it felt like piloting a spacecraft, but novelty doesn't always equal practicality. The buttons could jam, were awkwardly positioned, and often made simple driving feel like decoding a keypad. Repairs were a nightmare, and mechanics cursed the system's finicky internals. Eventually, by the mid-1960s, simplicity reclaimed the spotlight. Chrysler phased it out, and other automakers followed suit. What started as a design from tomorrow became just another artifact from a time when even gear selection was dressed in chrome and ambition. Manual window cranks. Long before power windows became standard, every driver knew the rhythmic wrist twist needed to lower a window. It was simple, mechanical, and refreshingly human. No electronics, no motors, just gears, muscle, and maybe a touch of elbow grease if the window got sticky in summer. They were built into just about everything from humble hatchbacks to full-size sedans, a standard feature for decades. But as car tech evolved, so did our tolerance for effort. Power windows became the new normal, and by the early 2000s, the crank began its slow fade. Even holdouts like the Jeep Wrangler, famous for keeping things analog, finally dropped manual windows in 2025, quietly closing the chapter on one of the last fully mechanical interfaces in modern cars. Still, there's something nostalgic about rolling down a window that actually rolls. It reminded us we were part of the machine, not just passengers in a mobile living room. Today, the crank survives mostly in memory, and maybe a few farm trucks, stuck somewhere between retro charm and "you're kidding, right?" Floor-mounted dimmer witches. Do you remember when adjusting your headlights meant performing a dance move with your ankle? Because apparently, in the 1930s, engineers decided your left foot wasn't busy enough. Starting around 1927, automakers began relocating the headlight dimmer switch from the dashboard to the floor, allowing drivers to control high and low beams with a simple tap of the foot. On paper, it sounded efficient. Keep your hands on the wheel and let your feet multitask. But in practice, it often felt like playing around a vehicular twister, especially at night, in the rain, on unfamiliar roads. Brands like Ford, Chevy, and Chrysler all embraced the design, despite the growing chorus of drivers who found it, at best, inconvenient, and at worst, a safety hazard. Taking your foot off the gas just to see better? Not exactly an ideal trade-off. Eventually, common sense caught up with innovation. By the 1970s, the dimmer switch had returned to its rightful place on the steering column, joining the turn signal lever and giving drivers one less reason to fumble with their footwear. Car phones. Slap an antenna on the roof, bury a shoebox-sized transceiver under the seat, and congratulations, you were officially driving a phone booth on wheels. In the 1980s, car phones weren't just about staying connected. They were rolling declarations of wealth and ambition. Massive, clunky, and wired straight into the vehicle's electrical system, they made everyday driving feel like a high-stakes business call, assuming you could get a signal. The technology had roots going back to 1946, when the Bell system debuted the first mobile telephone service in St. Louis. That early setup weighed a whopping 80 pounds and operated with only 3 shared channels citywide. Yet somehow, it ignited a global trend, inspiring mobile networks from Finland to Scandinavia and beyond. By the mid-80s, car phones had reached peak prestige, but despite the image boost, the experience itself was rough. Static-filled conversations, dead zones, and a heating unit that could roast your coffee. Then came the 1990s, bringing smaller, smarter handheld phones with them. Consumers happily ditched dashboard dialing for something that actually worked. Today, the car phone is little more than a relic, proof that being first isn't always the same as being good. But man, did it look impressive while it lasted. Fender skirts. Could a car really look more aerodynamic just by hiding its rear wheels under a sheet of metal? Apparently, designers in the mid-20th century thought so, and the Fender skirt was born. From the 1940s through the 60s, these curved metal covers, called spats in the UK and Australia, were bolted over the upper portion of a car's rear wheels. The idea was simple: create a clean, uninterrupted body line that made the car look longer, lower, and more luxurious. And for a while, it worked. Cars like the Cadillac DeVille and Chevy Impala floated down the road like yachts on white wall tires, with Fender skirts acting like chrome-trimmed tuxedo cuffs. But beneath all that elegance was a glaring inconvenience. Need to change a tire? Good luck. Those skirts had to be removed first, often with tools, turning a roadside repair into a mini pit stop. And aside from aesthetics, they did little else. No speed advantage, no fuel savings, just pure visual drama. As the 1970s rolled in, drivers began trading flash for function. Fender skirts faded from the scene, though a few models like the Cadillac Eldorado clung to them until the mid-decade. Stylish? Sure. Practical? About as much as wearing dress shoes to mow the lawn. If you're finding this video interesting so far, just comment "interest" to let us know you're sticking around till the end. Vent windows. Before climate control turned cars into rolling refrigerators, there was a humble hero perched at the edge of every front door: the vent window. Small, triangular, and criminally underappreciated, these pivoting glass panels brought fresh air to sweaty drivers long before Freon became a household name. From the 1930s through the 1980s, vent windows were standard on everything from family sedans to pickup trucks. Crack one open, and you got a steady breeze without the roar of a full window drop, or the joy of rain soaking your left leg. Some folks even mastered the art of angling them just right to blow cigarette smoke clean out the car. Precision airflow, analog style. But as air conditioning took center stage and designers obsessed over sleeker silhouettes and tighter seals, the vent window slowly disappeared. Automakers phased them out to save on production costs and improve aerodynamics, and by the 1990s, they were mostly gone. Still, classic car lovers haven't forgotten. In fact, some custom builders now go out of their way to add them back in. Why? Because there's something undeniably cool and deeply nostalgic about that little glass triangle swinging open like a chrome-trimmed wink from a simpler, breezier time. CD changers. I still remember the satisfying clunk of the disc carousel spinning in the trunk, like your car was thoughtfully flipping through albums before deciding which one to play next. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, the CD changer was the ultimate road trip flex. Forget fumbling with single discs. These systems let you load 6, 10, even a dozen CDs at once, tucked neatly into a magazine-style tray hidden under the seat or back in the trunk. With just a press of a dashboard button, you could jump from Nirvana to Nat King Cole without ever taking your eyes off the road. At home, some stereo systems could hold up to 400 discs, turning entire music collections into spin-and-play libraries. But despite their high-tech image at the time, CD changers weren't immune to hiccups. Carousels jammed, discs misread, and God help you if it shuffled into track 17 of a live bootleg. Still, there was something undeniably personal about them. You chose those discs. You built that sequence. And for a little while, your car wasn't just a vehicle. It was your rolling, spinning, clicking soundtrack to life. Now they're gone. But for many of us, those discs still echo. Hidden fuel fillers. Was there anything cooler than pulling into a gas station, flipping down your license plate, and watching confused onlookers try to figure out where your fuel cap had gone? In the 1940s and 50s, car makers began hiding gas fillers in the most unexpected places, not for performance, but purely for style. Cadillac's 1941 Series 62 was among the first to tuck its fuel cap behind the taillight, setting a trend that Chrysler, Oldsmobile, and Nash quickly followed. Some designs required lifting a hinged taillight. Others used clever pop-outs that felt more like secret compartments than automotive necessities. As the decades rolled on, the license plate trick took center stage. Ford and GM popularized the flip-down rear plate design, which became something of a signature move for American cars in the 1960s and 70s. The 1964 Thunderbird nailed the look, bold, sleek, and just a little bit mischievous. But for all its charm, the design wasn't perfect. Fueling could be awkward, messy, and occasionally damaging. Once center rear fuel fillers were banned for safety reasons, the fad faded fast. Still, that little hidden cap remains a beloved memory for many, a clever flourish from a time when even pumping gas was treated like part of the show. Not practical maybe, but definitely unforgettable. Highway Hi-Fi. Somewhere between the golden age of big band radio and the dawn of cassette tapes, Chrysler decided what your morning commute really needed was a vinyl record player under the dash. In 1956, the Highway Hi-Fi made its debut as an optional add-on for Chrysler, DeSoto, Dodge, and Plymouth models. It didn't use standard LPs or 45s. Instead, it spun special 7-inch records at an odd 16 2/3 RPM, a speed chosen specifically to squeeze out nearly an hour of music per side. These weren't your typical store-bought albums either. Chrysler partnered exclusively with Columbia Records, offering curated collections of orchestral tunes, Broadway soundtracks, and CBS historical broadcasts. Basically, your dad's dream road trip playlist. But for all its novelty, the system was far from perfect. The record player didn't love bumpy roads. Skipping was common, the sound quality was inconsistent, and the unit itself cost about $200, a small fortune in the Eisenhower era. Plus, It only played proprietary records, so no slipping in your own favorites. Still, it holds the honor of being the very first in-car audio system tied directly to a record label. Brief, flawed, and totally impractical, it was also brilliant in its own retro way. For a fleeting moment, Chrysler gave drivers vinyl dreams on 4 wheels. Ever wonder what happened to those car brands that once ruled the roads but vanished without a trace? Some soared, some stumbled, and others were gone before you even noticed. In this video, we're taking a fascinating ride through the forgotten legends of the auto world. Buckle up. It's a journey through automotive history you won't want to miss. Saturn. Back in 1985, General Motors launched a bold new experiment in car making, Saturn. Created as a standalone subsidiary, Saturn was GM's answer to the growing popularity of small, efficient imports. But Saturn wasn't just another car brand. It set out to do things differently, from its no-haggle pricing model at dealerships to its unique car designs. One of Saturn's standout features? Its innovative plastic body panels. These panels were dent-resistant and could pop back into shape after a minor bump, which made Saturns both practical and durable. Models like the Saturn Ion sedan and the sporty Saturn Sky Roadster stood out for their reliability and sleek style. The company developed a loyal following thanks to cars that weren't just affordable, they also seemed to last forever. Even today, you might still see a Saturn cruising by, quietly reminding you of its resilience. Despite solid sales and a fan base, General Motors decided to wind down the brand in 2010. It was part of a larger effort to restructure the company, but Saturn left behind a reputation for doing things its own way. Scion. Scion was Toyota's bold attempt to shake things up and attract a younger, trendier crowd. Launched in 2003, the brand aimed to break away from Toyota's more conservative image by offering compact, edgy cars with a fun, urban vibe. Models like the boxy Scion XB and the sleek, sporty Scion TC quickly caught attention. With cool designs, affordable pricing, and lots of customization options, Scion was marketed as the car for the next generation. And for a while, it worked. Young drivers appreciated the simplicity, the personality, and the fresh feel that Scion brought to the table. The brand stood for individuality and value, with a no-hassle, no-haggle buying process that matched the lifestyle of its target audience. But as time passed, the automotive market became more crowded, and competition in the compact car space grew fierce. Interest in Scion began to fade, and by 2016, Toyota decided to retire the brand. Some of Scion's best-loved models were rebranded under Toyota, but the name itself was put to rest. What classic car model do you think deserves a modern comeback? DeSoto. DeSoto was once a proud member of the Chrysler family, launched in 1928 with the goal of filling the gap between Chrysler's affordable and luxury brands. Named after the Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto, the brand quickly made its mark by offering stylish, mid-priced vehicles that stood out for their sleek designs and forward-thinking features. Through the 30s, 40s, and especially the booming 50s, De Soto built cars that captured the spirit of the times. Big fins, chrome accents, and bold, futuristic styling. But behind the flash, trouble was brewing. The late 1950s brought economic hardship, and the 1958 recession hit mid-priced carmakers especially hard. Sales took a nosedive, and De Soto found itself caught in a tight squeeze between Dodge and Chrysler's own lineup. By the early 60s, Chrysler decided it no longer made sense to keep the brand going. In 1961, De Soto quietly faded into history after more than 30 years on the road. Eagle. Eagle was a short-lived but memorable car brand born from a big acquisition. When Chrysler bought American Motors Corporation, AMC, in 1987, they inherited more than just Jeep. they also gained an opportunity to launch something new. And that something was Eagle. Aimed at younger drivers who wanted sporty, import-style vehicles without the high price tag, Eagle offered a fresh alternative in Chrysler's lineup during the late 1980s and 1990s. Eagle cars were often built in collaboration with international partners, blending American styling with Japanese engineering. Two standout models from the lineup were the Eagle Talon, a sleek, turbocharged coupe that turned heads, and the Eagle Summit, a compact car that offered solid performance and good value. These cars had a loyal following, especially among drivers who wanted something a little different. But despite their niche appeal, Eagle never gained the widespread success Chrysler had hoped for. With marketing focus shifting and other brands in the lineup competing for attention, Chrysler pulled the plug in the late 1990s. While the Eagle name disappeared, its sporty spirit still lives on in the memories of fans who loved its bold attempt to break the mold. Edsel. The Edsel is one of the most famous flops in automotive history, and it came from none other than the Ford Motor Company. Launched with huge fanfare in 1958, Edsel was meant to fill a gap in Ford's lineup between its standard and luxury models. Named after Henry Ford's son, Edsel Ford, the brand debuted with 8 different models, aiming to offer something bold, fresh, and futuristic. And bold it was. The Edsel featured a unique grille, cutting-edge features, and plenty of chrome. But the public didn't bite. Sales were far lower than expected, and critics weren't kind to its unconventional design. On top of that, the timing couldn't have been worse. The US was in a recession, and consumers were pulling back on spending. Despite Ford's massive investment and marketing push, the Edsel couldn't gain traction. By 1960, just 2 years after its launch, Ford pulled the plug. The Edsel name became a symbol of overhype and missed expectations. Still, for collectors and car buffs, it's a fascinating chapter in Ford's long and otherwise successful history. Avanti. The Avanti began its life in the early 1960s as a bold, futuristic model from the Studebaker Corporation. With its sleek fiberglass body, unique design, and advanced safety features, the Avanti stood out as something truly different during an era dominated by chrome and curves. It was intended to breathe new life into Studebaker, but when the company shut down a few years later, the Avanti's story didn't end there. After Studebaker closed its doors, the rights to the Avanti name and tooling were picked up by a group of investors who formed the Avanti Motor Company. They launched the Avanti II, a continuation of the original model with updated mechanics, often powered by Chevrolet engines. Over the decades, ownership changed hands several times, and the design saw a number of tweaks, but the car always maintained its classic roots. Despite its small production numbers, the Avanti kept rolling in limited quantities, gaining a cult following among enthusiasts. Production finally ceased around 2006, but the Avanti remains a symbol of innovation, resilience, and classic American style that refused to fade quietly. Rover. Rover is a name deeply woven into British automotive history, even if you don't see it on new cars today. The company was originally founded in 1878, long before cars were even a thing. It actually started out making bicycles. But by the mid-20th century, Rover had become a respected name in automobiles, especially known for creating the legendary Land Rover in 1948. Designed for rugged terrain and military use, the Land Rover quickly became a global icon for durability and off-road capability. Over time, Land Rover grew so popular that it eventually spun off into its own distinct brand. Meanwhile, the original Rover name continued producing passenger cars for a while, vehicles known more for their refined, practical style than for flashy performance. But as the years passed, the Rover brand struggled with financial issues, ownership changes, and tough competition. Eventually, the Rover brand stopped producing cars altogether. While Rover no longer exists as a standalone automaker, its legacy lives on through Jaguar Land Rover, which owns the rights to its name and history. The Rover name may have faded, but the impact it had, especially through Land Rover, remains strong on roads and trails worldwide. Tucker. The Tucker Corporation is one of the most fascinating what-could-have-been stories in automotive history. Founded in the 1940s by the bold and visionary Preston Tucker, the company set out to revolutionize the car industry with a vehicle unlike anything else on the road. Tucker had originally worked in aviation and defense, but he dreamed of building a car that was faster, safer, and more advanced than the competition. That dream became the Tucker 48, also known as the Tucker Torpedo. The car was ahead of its time, featuring innovations like a rear engine, a padded dashboard, seatbelts, and a third headlight that turned with the steering wheel. But despite the buzz, only 50 Tuckers were ever built. The company quickly became tangled in an investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission over allegations of stock fraud. Although Preston Tucker was later acquitted, the damage was done. Investors pulled out, and the company collapsed. The Tucker Corporation may have vanished, but its daring spirit and groundbreaking ideas still inspire car lovers and inventors to this day. Mercury. Mercury was Ford's answer to drivers who wanted a little more style and comfort than a basic Ford, but didn't want to spend luxury brand money. Launched in 1938, Mercury carved out its place as the middle child between Ford and Lincoln. It was designed to attract entry-level buyers who wanted something just a bit more upscale, and for a while, it worked. Mercury rolled out some standout models over the decades, like the sporty Cougar, the sleek Capri, and the dependable Sable. During its heyday, Mercury had a strong following, especially in the 60s and 70s. The brand stood for a quiet blend of performance and refinement. But as time went on, it struggled to stand out. Ford's main line improved, Lincoln pushed further into luxury, and Mercury started to feel stuck in the middle. Sales slowed, and the identity of the brand began to fade. By 2011, Ford made the decision to retire Mercury for good. It simply wasn't profitable anymore. And just like that, Mercury faded into history. A brand that once filled the gap, now just a memory. Hummer. The Hummer roared onto the scene in 1992, and it wasn't your average SUV. It was built like a tank. Born from the military-grade Humvee, the original Hummer was rugged, massive, and unapologetically bold. AM General created it for the civilian market, and it didn't take long for it to catch on, especially with celebrities like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who famously helped popularize the beastly ride. With its oversized tires, wide stance, and go-anywhere attitude, the Hummer stood out in every parking lot. In 1999, General Motors saw the brand's potential and took it over, expanding the lineup with models like the H2 and H3. For a while, Hummer symbolized excess and adventure, but as fuel prices climbed and environmental concerns grew, the demand for gas-guzzling giants faded fast. GM, already facing financial struggles, filed for bankruptcy and decided to discontinue Hummer in 2010. But the story didn't end there. In a surprising twist, GMC brought Hummer back in 2022, this time as an all-electric supertruck. Same bold attitude, just a whole new kind of power. Checker. When most people hear Checker, they think of those iconic yellow cabs cruising through big cities. But what many don't realize is that Checker wasn't just a taxi style, it was an actual car brand. Founded in 1922, the Checker Motors Corporation became best known for its tough, roomy sedans that dominated the taxi industry for decades. These cars were built to last, with spacious interiors, simple mechanics, and a rugged design that could take the daily beating of city streets. Checker cabs became a symbol of American urban life, especially in places like New York City. The most famous model, the Checker Marathon, barely changed for years, and that was part of its charm. It was built for function over flash, and it did its job exceptionally well. Checker Motors officially closed its doors in 2009 after years of financial struggles and filed for bankruptcy. But the brand hasn't been entirely forgotten. Rumors have swirled for years about a possible comeback, maybe as a retro-styled electric vehicle. While nothing is confirmed, the Checker name still sparks nostalgia, especially for anyone who ever hailed a cab in its heyday. Pontiac. There was a time when Pontiac ruled the American roads. Born in 1926 and backed by automotive giant General Motors, Pontiac quickly carved out a reputation for building bold, exciting cars that offered both power and personality. Over the years, it delivered some serious classics. Think the muscular GTO, the sleek Firebird, the stylish Grand Prix, and the ever-popular Grand Am. These cars weren't just transportation, they were statements. Pontiac became the go-to brand for drivers who wanted performance with attitude. But even legends can fall on hard times. After decades of success, the late 2000s brought trouble. The Great Recession hit the auto industry hard, and General Motors faced enormous financial pressure. As part of a government-assisted restructuring, GM made the tough decision to cut back. Sadly, Pontiac was one of the brands that didn't survive. In 2010, the last Pontiac rolled off the line, marking the end of an 84-year run. Did you or someone you know ever own a car from one of these now extinct brands? Share your story. Saab. Saab was more than just a car brand. It was a symbol of Swedish innovation and individuality. Introduced in 1945, right after World War II, Saab originally came from an aircraft company, which explains the brand's unique design and focus on safety. Their cars had a reputation for being quirky but reliable, with a loyal following around the world. Over the years, Saab changed hands several times, but each new chapter brought hope for a stronger future. In 2002, General Motors took the wheel, aiming to bring Saab into the global spotlight. But despite their efforts, the brand struggled to compete. Saab just couldn't find its place in a rapidly changing market. By 2011, production came to a halt, and for the first time in decades, no Saabs were made in 2012. In a last-ditch effort, a Swedish company bought the brand in 2013 and tried to relaunch it with electric vehicles, but the comeback didn't last. By 2014, Saab was officially shut down, this time for good. A quiet end to a brand that once soared. American Suzuki. American Suzuki had a unique presence on U.S. roads, compact, affordable, and often overlooked. Known for producing smaller vehicles like the SX4 and the Grand Vitara, Suzuki aimed to give budget-conscious drivers a reliable alternative to more expensive brands. But despite some loyal fans and a few clever models, the company never quite found its footing in the crowded American market. In 2012, after years of sluggish sales and increasing competition, American Suzuki filed for bankruptcy and officially shut down its U.S. auto operations. The company cited slow sales as the key reason behind the decision. While motorcycles and marine products continued under the Suzuki name, the car division in the U.S. came to a quiet end. However, Suzuki's story didn't stop there. Its parent company, Suzuki Motor Corporation, continues to thrive in Japan and other global markets, producing cars, motorcycles, and small trucks. Though American Suzuki is gone, its parent remains a strong force in the automotive world, just not on American highways anymore. Plymouth. Let's take a ride back in time to 1928. That's when automotive pioneer Walter P. Chrysler introduced the Plymouth brand. His goal was simple: create a dependable, affordable car for the average American family. At the time, many cars were out of reach for everyday folks, and Plymouth stepped in as the budget-friendly choice under the Chrysler Corporation umbrella. It was a smart move. For decades, Plymouth produced some beloved models, like the Roadrunner, the Barracuda, and the Voyager, that earned loyal fans across the country. But as the years rolled by, the competition grew fierce. Market demands changed, and Plymouth started losing its unique identity. By the late 1990s, sales were slipping, and Chrysler decided to shift focus. In 2001, after more than 70 years on the road, Plymouth officially drove off into the sunset. Some of its designs and spirit lived on through Dodge and Chrysler models, but the name itself was retired. Still, for many, Plymouth remains a symbol of solid, everyday American engineering from a golden era. Willys Overland. Willys Overland might not be a household name today, but its legacy is legendary, especially when it comes to one of the most iconic vehicles ever made, the Jeep. The company got its start back in 1908, producing everyday passenger cars during the early days of the American auto industry. But its big break came during World War II, when the U.S. government needed a lightweight, durable, all-terrain vehicle for the battlefield. Willys Overland answered the call, and what they built would go on to change automotive history. That rugged little vehicle became known as the Jeep, fast, simple, and built to conquer tough terrain. Soldiers loved it, and its success on the battlefield cemented its place in American culture. After the war, Willys shifted focus to building civilian versions of the Jeep, introducing a new generation to its toughness and utility. Despite the Jeep's popularity, Willys Overland struggled to compete in the broader car market. Financial issues piled up, and the company shut down operations in 1955. But the Jeep lived on, evolving under new owners, and eventually becoming a cornerstone of American adventure. AMC, American Motors Corporation. The American Motors Corporation, better known as AMC, was a bold attempt to shake up the U.S. auto industry. Formed in 1954 from the merger of two companies, Nash Kelvinator and Hudson, AMC became the largest corporate merger in U.S. history at the time. The goal? To take on the big three, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, with a fresh and competitive approach. And for a while, it worked. One of AMC's most influential leaders was George Romney, father of future presidential candidate Mitt Romney. As the company's first chairman and president, George Romney helped steer AMC toward a different path. He focused on smaller, fuel-efficient cars like the Rambler, at a time when Detroit was churning out oversized gas guzzlers. That strategy gave AMC an edge, especially during the late 50s and early 60s. Though AMC produced some memorable cars like the Gremlin, Pacer, and Javelin, it struggled to stay afloat as the market shifted. In the 1980s, it was acquired by Chrysler, and by around 1988, AMC was officially shut down. While it didn't survive, AMC is still remembered for its innovation and underdog spirit. DeLorean. Few car brands have captured pop culture quite like DeLorean. Founded in 1975 by former General Motors executive John DeLorean, the company produced only one car, the iconic DMC-12. With its futuristic stainless steel body and gull-wing doors that opened upward like wings, the DeLorean looked like something from another world. And thanks to its starring role as a time machine in the Back to the Future film trilogy, it became a legend far beyond the showroom floor. The DMC-12 certainly made an impression, but the company itself had a rocky road. Financial troubles plagued DeLorean Motor Company from the start, and production was short-lived. In 1982, just 7 years after launching, the company filed for bankruptcy. The same year, John DeLorean was arrested in a highly publicized drug trafficking case. Though he was later acquitted, the damage was done. DeLorean never returned to the industry and passed away in 2005. In recent years, the DeLorean brand has seen a glimmer of revival. A new electric model was announced, aiming to hit the streets in 2024. While delays have kept it in the factory for now, the dream of seeing a DeLorean back on the road isn't over just yet. Packard. Packard was once the gold standard of American luxury, long before names like Cadillac or Lincoln became household favorites. Founded in 1899, Packard built a reputation over 5 decades for producing some of the most elegant, high-end vehicles ever made in the U.S. These weren't just cars, they were status symbols. With their graceful lines, handcrafted details, and powerful engines, Packards were driven by the wealthy, admired by many, and respected by the entire automotive world. The company's motto, "Ask the man who owns one," wasn't just clever. It was a reflection of Packard's belief in quality over everything. From their stately sedans to their eye-catching convertibles, Packard vehicles were known for refinement, engineering, and quiet sophistication. But by the 1950s, the tides were changing. The brand struggled to compete with the massive marketing and production power of the Big Three automakers. Despite efforts to merge and survive, Packard built its final car in 1958. Now, more than 70 years later, Packard remains a symbol of a time when cars weren't just made, they were crafted. Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, don't hesitate to hit the like button below. If there's anything we can improve, take a moment to leave a comment. We're always looking to get better. Thanks so much. Rambler. The Rambler name may not be rolling off assembly lines today, but it holds a special place in the history of American automobiles. The brand got its start in the early 1900s with the Thomas B. Jeffrey Company, one of the pioneering car manufacturers of the era. Rambler was known for producing dependable, modestly priced vehicles that appealed to middle-class drivers who needed something reliable and practical. In a time when the auto industry was still in its infancy, Rambler helped lay the groundwork for what would become mainstream car ownership. The company eventually changed hands and names, becoming part of Nash Motors, and later, after a major merger in 1954, it formed the American Motors Corporation, AMC. Under AMC, the Rambler brand saw a new wave of popularity, especially during the 1950s and early 60s, when compact, fuel-efficient cars were in high demand. But by 1969, AMC made the decision to retire the Rambler name in favor of newer branding. Still, the Rambler legacy lives on as a symbol of innovation, practicality, and resilience in a fast-changing automotive world. Isuzu. Isuzu may not be the first name that comes to mind when you think of car brands in America, but this Japanese automaker played a key role in shaping the SUV craze we know today. Isuzu entered the US market in the early 1980s and quickly gained traction with rugged, no-nonsense SUVs like the Trooper and the Rodeo. These vehicles were built to handle tough terrain while still being practical for families, and they arrived just as Americans were starting to shift away from sedans toward more versatile rides. For nearly 30 years, Isuzu carved out a niche, helping to popularize the SUV long before it became a standard choice in driveways across the country. But as larger automakers jumped on the SUV trend with more marketing muscle and fresher designs, Isuzu began to lose ground. Sales started to slide, and the company couldn't keep up with the competition. In 2009, Isuzu officially pulled out of the American passenger vehicle market. Though you won't find their new cars at US dealerships today, their early influence on the SUV boom is still felt on the roads. Studebaker. Studebaker's story goes way back, farther than most car brands you've ever heard of. It all started in 1852, not with engines or wheels, but with a blacksmith shop run by 5 industrious brothers in South Bend, Indiana. Back then, they built sturdy horse-drawn wagons and carriages, earning a reputation for quality craftsmanship. As the world shifted gears into the age of the automobile, Studebaker made the leap and began producing cars in the early 1900s. They were one of the few companies that successfully transitioned from the horse and buggy era into the world of motor vehicles. For decades, Studebaker stood out for its bold, stylish designs and innovation. Models like the Commander and the sleek Avanti turned heads and built a loyal fan base. But despite their legacy, Studebaker struggled to keep up with the big three, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, who could offer cars at lower prices due to their size and scale. By 1967, faced with mounting losses and fierce competition, Studebaker shut down car production. It marked the end of a remarkable 115-year journey. Kaiser Frazer. Kaiser Frazer was a rare spark of automotive ambition that came to life in 1947, just as America was roaring back to life after World War II. The company was born from a partnership between two powerful figures in the industry, industrialist Henry J. Kaiser and former Ford executive Joseph Frazer. Together, they formed what would become one of the very few successful post-war car companies in the U.S. And for a brief moment, it looked like they might just give the big three a run for their money. Their cars, including the Kaiser and Frazer models, were sleek, stylish, and loaded with forward-thinking features. They hit the market when car buyers were hungry for something new after years of wartime shortages. And they delivered. But the success didn't last. As the post-war boom settled and the giants of the industry regained their footing, Kaiser Frazer struggled to stay competitive. In 1953, the company merged and eventually evolved into Kaiser Motors, which later led to Kaiser Jeep. Though the original brand faded fast, Kaiser Frazer holds a unique place in history as the only new American automaker to succeed in the immediate aftermath of World War II. Which of these old-school car quirks do you secretly miss or are glad to leave in the rear view? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this nostalgic ride, give us a like, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss another trip down memory lane.